episode here with the Struggling Hunters. And before we get any further, if you could do a huge favor and hit the like button, you should see a little thumbs up thing there. Hit down. If you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and do that right now.
Helps us out more than you know.
Thanks, guys. We appreciate you taking a few seconds there and hitting that button. And welcome to another episode with the Struggling Hunters. You have me, Joe, and the other side over here.
You got Eric?
You got Eric. I did that backwards. I'm the one talking. I should have introduced Eric first, me second. But hey, we're struggling. And but we've got a couple of topics we're going to go down today. It's probably going to seem like we're chasing our tails, which we kind of are, to be honest. But there's some little topics that we kind of want to discuss. And I mean, I know we don't really have a formal plan typically. You can probably tell when you listen to us, but this one's maybe a little more informal than the other ones we have done before. But I guess with that, we'll just dive right into our rabbit holes discussion here in the hunting shack. I guess let's see where we end up.
Yeah, that works for me. That works for me. You want me to kick it off real quick?
Sure. Or? Let's see what Eric has as a first up here.
So this week I'm going to talk about something that is a little controversial or whatnot, but I'll kick it off with some poaching. What my thoughts are on poaching and how they've changed over time. And to articulate this a little bit better, first of all, I was listening to Bear Grease. It's a meat eater podcast off of the Meat Eater empire that they have over there with Clay Newcomb, and he was doing this episode or this series of some local people that he knows that did some turkey hunting, poaching for a lot of years, and they actually had investigations against him or against these guys. And it's a whole series. It's a really cool series to go check out if you want to check them out. But what got my wheels spinning was old thoughts from like the olden days. So whenever I say poaching, I've never really been for poaching, but I've had a few. I'm really having a hard time articulating this. I've had a few, or I've always understood for some families that poached. I've always kind of had a soft spot for families that had to poach. I'm totally against poaching
for sport
and trophy and just for horns. I've heard of stories where people find a whole deer but the horns cut off, and it sickens me to no end. But I've always had a soft spot for people that needed the meat for their family. But as time has went on, and this is the part where my thoughts have kind of changed and formulated because of the stretch or for the drive for conservation, if you will, to be, to help conservation. I've changed to where I think that's even. I think poaching in general is just wrong and nobody should do it. And even though that I've had a soft spot for people that needed to take care of their family in one way or another, but we're also talking about tags that are like $50, $30, and I think about that in terms of like sometimes people will go spend $100 on something that they don't really need, and then gripe about spending $100 on something that they have to have. And so my thoughts as I've gotten older have changed toward that mindset of like, well, people that really need it, need the meat or whatever, if they do it or whatnot, I kind of have a soft spot for them because they're just trying to feed their family. But at the same time, for conservation, I'm like, that takes away a lot of things for other people. And I know that some people, think like, well, it's just one deer. Like, what's one deer? But, you're not the only one poaching. There's other people that are doing it. And then the people that paid money to get that animal, it's kind of unfair for them because they paid the money and then you may have taken the animal that they could have gotten, or you applied pressure in the area to where everything's scattered, and then the person that actually paid the fee to be able to hunt doesn't get that animal. I don't know if I'm articulating it right, and it's a little controversial, but I'll just kind of reiterate, I guess, again, and just say, I used to, as growing up, I knew people that, didn't have all the money in the world or whatever, and I'm like, well, they're feeding their family. As I've gotten older and stuff, I'm like, you just gotta do what you gotta do. You have to pay for your tags on your license plate. You gotta pay for your like. There's just certain things that you have to pay for, and conservation is one of them. And I think for our animals to thrive and survive, the more people that contribute to that, I feel like is better all the way around. So as I've gotten older and been more about conservation and understanding conservation, my mind has changed on that, where I'm like, I don't think there's an excuse for anybody that poaches. And I hope I'm articulating that right. Like, I feel like I thought about this all day because I knew I was going to bring this up, and then as I started speaking, I'm like, oh, what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to do it in a way because I want it to be clearly known that I'm not for poaching whatsoever, and I've never really been for it, but I've always had a soft spot for what people would deem as like somebody that needed the meat.
Right.
I've always had that soft spot. I grew up in a small town. I knew some people that poached. But I guess maybe being a part of that community, I didn't really see the problem in it. But one thing that really makes me against it is the fact that, like, the person that does pay for all the tags and does put in the time, and the people that are poaching, whether they're doing it to provide for their family in their own way or not, like they are taken away from the people that are paying for the tags. And so I guess that's kind of where it gets tricky, because when I was younger and I didn't really put a lot of thought into it, I was like, people that poach for their family, I understand it. But as I got to thinking put more thought into it, it started getting more cringy to me. Like, the more I thought about it, and the more I thought, well, you're taking away from conservation, you're taking away from as much as we like, we think that the Fish and Game or Division of Wildlife, whatever you want to call them, Parks and Wildlife, whether we think that they make mistakes in some of their choices or not, like, people that poach, they kind of skew that data. They kind of, they take away from the data that they need to make better decisions toward conservation, to make our herd stronger, to make wildlife stronger and thrive in the woods.
Right.
And so like, the more, I guess the way to put it is, like, the more educated you get about hunting and the more educated you are about conservation, which I feel like I know enough to be dangerous, but the more you understand that, the more you realize how poaching, there's never a time for it.
Well, like, that's kind of, so if we kind of simplify it a little bit and maybe put it in a different way, I'll start by saying I kind of agree with you. It feels like there's a need for it at times. But then at the same time, we talk about conservation, and a prime example would be the buffalo or the bison.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of where we are now with regulations and tags and a lot of the amount of deer that tag number limits. Like, it's not like there's an unlimited amount of tags for each hunting unit. Each hunting unit has a specific amount of tags, which allows for a sustainable herd to be maintained. Arguably, some areas you can argue that it's overhunted. I get that, but go back to the bison. Bison used to be free roaming, and people took advantage of that and would just shoot them. And now we have some free roaming herds, but there's not really the herd population that there used to be, and there's not really, in a way, there's not even the ability for a herd to be free roaming. There's not room for for multiple herds everywhere through every state to be free roaming.
Mm-hmm.
So but we almost lost the bison herds because it wasn't regulated. It was in a way before poaching was poaching. They were all poached, and now bison herd is protected pretty good. And like I get tags and poaching, and I get both sides, but the conservation side of it, if we want this sport, I hate calling it a sport. I mean, it is a sport, but like it's almost a way of life in a way. More, but if we want this to be passed down to generations, it has to be in extent regulated somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's that mentality too. If it wasn't regulated, well, John went and shot 5 deer. Well, I want to be able to do that, so I'm gonna go shoot 6 deer or whatever, and if I can go do that whenever the season, during whatever I want, then that's gonna start depopulating the herds, deer or an elk.
And that's the thing too. Like, let's for an example, using John as like I don't know anybody named John that
I don't
poaches,
either.
so that's why I'm using the name as an example. But let's say there's a John out there that's like, what's the big deal? It's just one deer out of the. Well, what if there's 20 other Johns out there, and they're all saying the same thing? Then that's 20 deer, and then that they didn't buy a tag for, that they illegally poached, that whatever their method of take was, but it was all illegal, and it takes away from the people that did buy the tag. It takes away from the conservation efforts of your state agencies, and it takes away from a lot more. And I think that's the hardest concept to understand, is because it's easy to be like, well, what's the big deal? It's just one deer. But whenever there's 20 Johns out there, 30 Johns out there, whatever, it starts taking. It's a bigger piece of the pie than what you think. That you selfishly kind of think, and sometimes I feel like that's what it is it's a little bit selfish, and so it's just a hard thing. But I wanted to kind of bring it up I just wanted to bring that subject up and talk about it a little bit, because I mean, I don't know, I guess if somebody out there that listens to this podcast that knows John, you could probably maybe talk to him and be like, hey, maybe next year you could buy that tag, like I'll buy it for you or something. But I kind of going off of what you were saying with the bison and stuff, I feel like these podcasts, these hunting podcasts and everything, like the reason it's to bring up the discussion, it's to help educate and to try to teach and learn and think about things in different ways. And I feel like, even me, whenever I'm listening to the hunting podcasts that I'm into, I'm learning new ideas and new thought patterns and stuff, and 20 years ago, I didn't think too much of it. I cringed at anybody that would, I never knew anybody particular that would like take horns off, or at least they never told me.
Right.
But I would hear stories of people like, oh, I saw a full deer with no horns, and what's that about? Those would just make me cringe. I'd be mad. I'd be like, man, where's that deer at? I'll go grab the meat or something, and I mean, because I just hated the idea of wasting an animal, and
Right.
But I always had a soft spot. I had family members that were kind of poor and stuff, and so I always had a soft spot for people that were having a rough time to get their animal and stuff. But like I said, as I've been more educated with conservation, I mean, it's just, I feel like that's where the turning point is understanding how important our animals are to us. It just takes away a lot, and it also creates the bad name that some of these anti-hunting groups have. It that kind of feeds into it. Like, oh, see, told you, they're bad people, and it's like, well, no, like, I feel like as hunters we love our animals more than these anti-hunting groups love the animals. They try to talk a big game, but their tactics really don't work the way that conservation works. The way, thank God for Teddy Roosevelt and the efforts that he pushed way back when, because we probably wouldn't have any animals today if he didn't do what he did. And as I've learned more about Teddy Roosevelt, that guy was amazing. The stuff that he accomplished in his lifetime is just mind boggling. But the conservation one, obviously for hunters, is like the big one to hang on to and be like, wow, that guy, like, he had such foresight. I'm really wonder sometimes if it wasn't for him, where conservation would be, where hunting would be in general, because we might be having a whole nother kind of podcast,
right?
And maybe like a camping podcast or something. I don't know,
right?
But there's so many ways to go to like think about this or whatever. But I don't know. I just think that we all need to do our part in conservation, and that's something that I'm focusing my efforts on and trying to be better at. And I'm proud, man. I'm so like, so there was things whenever I was younger. Speaking of like, I always looked at like fish and game. I say fish and game a lot because over here in Colorado it's parks and wildlife, but growing up in Idaho it was fish and game forever. I think they recently changed the name. I'm not 100% sure about that. But anyway, I say fish and game a lot, but I basically Department of Wildlife or whatever it is, whatever your state says or whatever. But growing up, like, they were kind of like the enemy. I was kind of raised that way, where they were the enemy. They were, out to get you or whatever, but they're not. They're just making sure that you're legal. So I had a safety person years ago say this about DOT. If you don't know what DOT is, it's Department of Transportation. It's whenever you drive big trucks or whatever, the way stations that big trucks pull into to check in or whatever. The safety person though said a long time ago, and I just always ring in my head, is if you know that you're not doing anything illegal, there's nothing to be worried about. Because everybody, like, if you're a CDL holder, like, everybody's like, oh, DOT, like, it's kind of like a, oh, they're gonna get me or whatever. But if you know that your truck's legal, if you did the proper pre-trip and everything like that before you went on the road, and your paperwork's good, everything's good, like, you really have nothing to worry about. And so I think of that same thought pattern with being out in the woods. If a fish and game officer stops me and says, hey, what are you up to or whatever, it's like, hey, yeah, check out my tag, check out everything I got, like, I'm doing everything legal. Because if you don't got nothing to hide, then there's nothing to worry about. Yeah. So, and I think we need to think that way a lot more often, and just realize that they're just doing their job too, And really, I feel like you want to help them, if you see somebody, doing something illegal, like, it's probably worth saying something. Now, one comment I said to Joe this last year is I'm like, man, sometimes I want to be 100% legal all the time. I do. But sometimes, like, you get so frustrated, you're like, man, I just want to play in the gray a little bit to up my chances, like, and it's hard. And so, and that's just if you're having a hard time out there hunting or whatever, it gets a little frustrating. You're like, oh, how can I make this, seal the deal on this? But at the end of the day, man, I feel like you just walk away with a clear conscience doing the right thing.
Right.
And there's no reason to make them your enemy, man. They're just doing a job just like most of you guys have jobs or whatever. They're just doing their job. And, sometimes you might be trying to abide by the law to the T or whatever, but there's a rule out there that you never heard of and they get you on it. I mean, I know that's how, I've heard stories like that's happened. But most of the time, they're pretty level-headed and they're not really out to get you. You scared me for a second. I thought we've really went a ways on this topic. But anyways, guys, do you have any more on conservation really? Or
no, I don't.
Have I explained it to death?
Yeah.
All right. Well, guys, I just wanted to bring it up. It's a little controversial conversation, but, like, I don't know. I just kind of putting my thoughts out there on the old podcast. So with hunt season coming and archery being kind of in the hotter part of the season, what do you think you should do to prepare for
the hot, dry climate?
Yes.
So I've been thinking a lot about that at work lately because I got work inside now, and I step outside to go get some parts every once in a while. And today was like the first day. I don't know if it's the first day, but I actually noticed we hit 100 degrees, and stepping outside and it got me thinking too, because I was like, I'm not working outside anymore, so I got to keep myself acclimated to the heat, and I think I got to start making sure I'm scouting in the heat or walking, when it's hot, so that way when the season starts, I'm kind of used to the heat, and I'm not used to the heat.
It's not like
So,
a shock to the system.
right, for when I take off, start hiking. But like that being said too, is I think a big thing is start hydrating now. Making sure you're getting enough water, so that way when the season hits, you're not the first day out. Well, I know cramps happen whenever, but like you're healthy as possible, or acclimated and used to the heat when you start getting out there. So that way you're not spending the first night after the first day back at camp hurting and not looking forward to day number 2.
Yeah. There's a lot of variables that happen on day number 2. You think that you're good for the season, then you get out there and things don't quite go to plan, or I don't know, or you walk a few extra miles than you thought you were going to, or whatever. You get back to camp and you're like, oh, I am so tired and beat, and yeah, it's definitely there's a lot of management that goes on whenever you're doing that. From past experience, that's what I've learned, and that's why most of the time, like right now, I mean it's June, but
Right.
September is 3 months away. Right now, whatever kind of workout program or whatever, like this is the time to start. Start that kind of working on a diet, workout program, staying hydrated, drink plenty of water. Try to get in as best shape as you can. I mean that I think that varies per person, but if you know that you're in some rugged area or whatever you're gonna be hunting, I mean right now is the time to probably start jumping in on that and trying to get in the best shape you can, so you can enjoy.
Well, and that's enjoy is probably the key word there, because no matter what, you want to enjoy your experience. But also on top of that is, I feel like to be a good elk hunter, you got to go the extra mile, and going the extra mile means you got to be in extra shape,
Kinda, yeah.
both physically and mentally. Because I guess that's what I was trying to get to, is like kind of the mental side of it is if you're hot and out of shape, you're not going to want to push very hard to go very far from the truck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Being mentally tough is everything. Cameron Haynes said it on a podcast not too long ago. I can't remember which podcast. Oh, I think it was on Meat Eater. I listen to a lot of Meat Eater podcasts, I guess. But on Meat Eater, Cameron Haynes said something about being mentally tough to where, like, looking at a ridge doesn't bother you whatsoever. Like, so, you're like, the elk are over that ridge, or whatever reason you got to get over that ridge is nothing to you. Like, you don't think about it. You don't, I got to get over this ridge. Because basically what he was saying was like kind of having a clear mind a little bit and not thinking about the ridge so much, just thinking about the task at hand. Because the minute that you start thinking of the ridge, then your mind starts getting exhausted before your body even gets exhausted, because you're
Right, well,
you're starting to kind of almost panic about the ridge.
Right, and like
he said it a lot better than I did, but
like along that lines, it's like, yeah, you gotta keep your brain there too. So, and like, it's one of those things, like once your feet go, once you're out of shape and you stop enjoying what you're doing, your brain starts to give up too, it seems like, and then you're just done.
Yep.
And then you're not going, you're like unsuccessful. Well, maybe that's been our problem, but you're not successful. You're running around doing things and that you probably don't fully understand why, making decisions because you're just tired and almost willing to give up, I guess.
Yep. Yeah. I think that actually that rings true. I think it's happened to me where I don't know. I try to always get to the next step, but I've exhausted out. Like with you on the, I remember like that one time I was just like, it wasn't that I was done, but my body, or you know, I was like, man, I'm exhausted. You know, I couldn't quite hang, and that was because I didn't prepare well enough for the season. Actually, I mean that really I was out of shape, and I think in my head I thought I was in better shape than I was, but I wasn't really. I wasn't. Like looking back, I realized that I wasn't at all. But at the time, I thought, oh, I ain't that bad of shape. And then, but have you ever been with somebody that you're like in the middle of nowhere basically, and they're like, oh, I'm done. And you're like, you can't be right now. Like I don't care how bad it hurts, you gotta move because I can't carry you out.
No, I haven't, because I haven't really hunted with all that many other people.
Oh, well.
I've always been by myself.
Okay, well, that makes it a little easier, I guess. But
well, I take it back. When I got my buck, this 9 years ago, I had my brother with me, and we were kind of in a hellhole, and we were very unprepared without realizing we were, and we were both pretty done by the time we got back to the truck. And you know, we didn't give up, but like. We couldn't carry each other out, but we got back to the truck, and yeah, it was one of those like we were ready to be done way before we got back to the truck.
Those always make the best stories, though.
Yep.
You know, every time I've ever had an easy time out in the woods, I don't remember those ones or talk about them very much, but the hard ones are the ones that you always remember and make the most story out of.
Right.
So.
Very true.
Should we get out of here?
Sure. Yeah, I was just gonna say, kind of close that one up though. Here is we went off topic there a little bit, but that was just mostly, you know, keeping yourself mentally in shape too. Like, you know, understand that there's gonna be hard work, and there's only one way to get through hard work.
Yep, 100%. So guys, we'll probably talk about it more, but keep yourselves sharp. Work hard on the on working. Getting your fitness going, work, you know, no poaching. And with that said, guys, thanks for listening to the Struggling Hunters and the Hunting Shack. We really appreciate you. Consider subscribing, liking, doing the whole thing. It helps us out a ton. We're just trying to grow and do the best we can. So if you could help us out, that'd be great. With that said, guys, the Struggling Hunters are out of here.
Have a good one, guys.
Oh.